Misalliance is on the Royal George. Misalliance, another one of Shaw's family dramas, except of course I love the fact that he sets out to give us a play that looks like it's a family out in the country having a kind of regular weekend to and fro, and then of course, oh wait, what happens at the end of just before the intermission? A plane crashes in, and who gets out of the plane? Well, of course we don't want to give it away, but so what you have is the notion literally of Shaw just smashing the whole idea of the civilized English countryside, and with these wonderful characters come in, and I love it because I think it's one as a generational piece, the whole notion of parenthood and families, and which Shaw deals with always so interestingly. But I'm especially excited by this production because I think when I talked to Ida Holmes, who wanted to direct it, and I'd asked to direct it, and she said, you know, we've done it at the Shaw before, certainly. Well, I don't know how many times we've done it, but the last two productions were very singular. And she was saying, you know, I really want to have a new way of looking at the piece. And she came upon the idea of, she and Judith Bowden, the designer, of setting it in the 60s, in 1962 to be exact. And I sort of went, okay, well, you know, it's always good to rethink these things. I said, sure, go for it. And of course, I'm thrilled with how it's turned out because what it does is it just makes you look, I think, at the characters in a new way. The notion of a newly liberated Hypatia, the young heiress in it. Of course, it being the early 60s, you get the notion of the young women of Shaw's time, and of course the feminism of the 60s. That's a wonderful kind of correlation. I think, interestingly, the wife, Mrs. Tarleton, in this production becomes a stronger and more complex character because we see her as a woman of this time as opposed to necessarily just a much more passive woman that she may be in Shaw's time. And so all the stories pop, and that's something that we're really trying to do with our Shaws here. I think always find a new point of access, a new way of telling these wonderful stories. So again, I was very excited that they took this mode, and having seen the show, of course, I think that they've really succeeded in giving a real freshness to the production. Terence Rattigan is a writer, an English writer that I think we've had great success with. He's an interesting writer because if you think of, he can write plays like After the Dance, which is the sort of the heartbreaking piece of his that we did here a few years ago, but he can also write Harlequinade, which is the crazy, farcical one act that we did as a lunchtime. And he really constantly, throughout his career, moved from very high drama, or dark drama, to high comedy. And this piece that I looked at, which made me laugh a lot, was French Without Tears, which in fact was actually his first big hit and ran in the West End in England for over a year. And this again is delightful because we have wonderful young actors coming up through the company at the moment. And this I thought was a great opportunity because it's all about some young men who are, these young British men who are sort of meant to be becoming diplomats, and they're all from the right schools and so on, and they're all turfed off to this a place on the coast in France, a kind of farmhouse, where they're immersed and they have to learn how to speak French. And well, most of them aren't very good at it, put it that way. And there's a kind of curmudgeonly Captain Mangot who's trying to teach them French. And of course, he just happens to have a very beautiful daughter. And then she has a very beautiful friend. And so, of course, really, French, forget it. You know, it's really not on these young men's minds at all. So, and I loved it too. And I thought also, just in terms of Canadians, I mean, the whole notion of, like, when I came here to Canada many years ago, and people would always talk about French immersion, and I sort of some kind of like baptismal thing, you know. I don't know, what is it? Like they got put in water or what, you know. And of course, it was only then when I had children and this whole notion of French immersion and the you know, this so-called bilingual country, and the whole notion of learning French. And I was always, you know, I heard about people going off to farmhouses in Quebec and trying to immerse themselves in French. So I thought, well, surely there must be many people, certainly in Canada, who are going to relate to this kind of story for sure. But I think really mainly everybody will relate to the really fun tales of these young men and their preference for, you know, female French as opposed to, you know, Captain Mango's French, put it that way. So again, Kate Lynch is directing that, and as I say, it's really lovely to see all those young members of the company. And interesting, of course, because inside, right in the middle, as Captain Mango, is Michael Ball, who's you know, the one for one of our longest term actors, and he kind of sits there gloriously anchoring these young people as they kind of fly around him. I have a huge love for the plays of William Inge. I think that William Inge, writer of, you know, Picnic at Bus Stop, Dark at the Top of the Stairs, is an extraordinary writer, and I think had a misfortune in a way of kind of coming on the American scene at the same time as Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller, who I think have kind of, their reputations have kind of, you know, gone beyond them, and somehow I feel like he got overshadowed. He wrote 4 plays, they happened, you know, on Broadway, bang, 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 hits, and then essentially he became forgotten. In fact, his own personal story is very sad. But his plays are beautiful, and they're wonderful ensemble pieces. They require great detail. They're about, he was a man, came from Kansas, they're set in Kansas, they're about seemingly simple people who maybe don't have quite as simple problems as we think at the beginning. And of course we've done Picnic, which we did in the courthouse, we've done Bus Stop, which we did in the George, and I directed both of those, and hugely enjoyed working on these pieces. Feel of great humanity and great heart, and sometimes melancholy. And so Come Back Little Sheba is going to be our third Inge play, and I'm thrilled to be directing that. I'm working on it right now, and so I'm at that verbally kind of phase with it, so I'll try not to talk about it too much. But it's essentially a piece where we watch a couple who are in kind of stasis, an older couple, and they have, it's been a hard life. One of them is an alcoholic and is trying not to drink. So you sort of see this sense of optimism. Is this going to happen? Are their lives going to not be stuck anymore? And yet inside that life comes a young woman who ends up as a boarder, and her life and her journey starts to really kind of connect with theirs. So it's a play that has darkness, but it's a play that also has a kind of wonderful cockeyed optimism in it, and a sense of hope, ultimately. It's Rick Reed and Corinne Coslow play the couple, Doc and Lola, and again, 2 young actors in the company, Julia Corse and Ken McGarry, play the young couple. And then, you know, as lucky as we are here, of course, you literally will hear, who's Mrs. Kaufman, the German lady next door, and you go, oh my gosh, it's Sherry Flett. You know, we're so lucky that we have this kind of bench strength.